Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting for November 1st. If we could, please, if everybody's seen the agenda, we're going to have a call to order and approval of minutes for October. If I can get a,
So moved.
I'll second that.
all right, we all agree? All right.
Yes.
That's pretty easy. Discussion of the third quarter actual versus budget. I think, we all have the spreadsheet here. Todd emailed last night, I believe, and said he can't make it. Maybe, the only thing I'd say is that there are some things that I'm not sure why we're over in certain areas. I mean, obviously, we're under in other areas as well, which is good to see. And it looks like some of the revenues are maybe a little higher than expected from what I can tell in some of the areas. And I don't know if some of those are just due to timing or some of it is like permits and things like that seem to be quite a bit higher, which is probably expected, more so than when the budget was prepared. But there are some things that are over, and I'm not sure why. I mean, even some salary areas and things like that where we're 30% over budget, and I'm not sure why that is. If that's I think that's just something that I think that's why it's really important to have a working budget. I mean, I'm just going to say this again. I mean, it just makes sense. I mean, we just went through the budget process, and for the life of me, I'm not sure why we don't have a working budget like every major organization. I'm not so sure that, we want to emulate Washington, when it comes to the budget process. I think we should act maybe a little bit more like a business and say, hey, here's where our budget is. Sometimes it moves, and I get it. We wouldn't necessarily readjust it with DLGF, but internally we can understand what that budget is and where we're going to be. It would, in fact, just to make this one statement here is that, when we do the budget and you heard a lot about, we started in the spring and everybody had an opportunity to ask questions, et cetera, et cetera. Could you imagine a day when we actually worked on the budget over the course of a year, every quarter? And so that way, when it came to the spring, you don't really have to go back and do these things over and over again. You kind of know where everybody's at. You understand what everybody's needs are, and you move forward. And then, when you do have questions, again, it can be a little bit more concise. And then we can actually have the department heads come up, present their budget to us like we asked this year. And then everybody's pretty much on the same page. I think that makes a lot of sense. Joe, Scott, any comments?
The only thing I'd like to add to that, Troy, and first of all, I think you hit the nail on the head. You're absolutely correct. The one thing I would add is, and I don't know if we can do this at this upcoming council meeting, but at the full council meeting, I recommend that we pull that resolution that we passed that request exactly what you just described. So that, again, it's front of mind, and it's a reminder not only to the entire council, but also to the administration that these are the expectations. This is what we expect.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I agree.
Okay. All right. I really don't have anything else on the budget. Do you guys have anything? I mean, that stuck out to you on the budget?
One thing that stuck out to me is that some of these costs are more than we think. I mean, I always say at every meeting that we tend to overestimate revenue and underestimate expenses. And Westfield's not the only place that does that. I mean, there's a lot of places that do that. But in the end, even a not-for-profit like the city of Westfield has to make a profit.
Yeah.
And that includes borrowed money, the whole 10 yards. If we do not, there's a lot of talk about how do you kick the can down the road. Well, kicking the can down the road means that you delay the day of reckoning when you have to clean on certain things. And I believe that we ought to be very careful of our debt, which I think we're pretty good at that, but be very clear in what we present to the public.
Yeah.
And if you look at this, I mean, I'm not condemning that, but that's a lot to absorb. It's like reading 319 pages. I'll have to fully admit, I haven't got all through that yet. But these things are done in what I call legalese,
Yeah.
and they're not easy to swallow, or not, swallow's not the right word. They're not easy to figure out, and somehow we have to have something that, and I think OpenGov is that tool, and there has to be a kind of a systematic way in which numbers are given to OpenGov, and I don't have an answer for that, but that's one of the things we've got to work on, so we get it out there and we can see it and kind of digest it, I think is the word I was looking for, to bring it into fruition, so we know what's going on, because in the end, we're kind of responsible.
Yeah.
And sometimes that information is not presented to us.
Yeah.
In fact, many times it's not presented to us. And I think part of that is addressed in this, although I'm going to jump ahead a little, in this Baker-Tilly thing about how information is shared. And I think it needs to be, this city needs to do a better job of sharing information.
Yeah, just to piggyback on the OpenGov comment, because I know it was actually in the report, I'm not saying that OpenGov's not a good thing. I think it could be a good thing. The problem is that it's not accurate, and I have no doubt that the program works, but the fact that we keep two sets of books, and one of them is not accurate, and one of them is the
Official.
the record. I mean, and I get it, things are gonna change from the budget process, but the other part of it, I mean, they should equal each other, so that way the taxpayer can see. I mean, man, I'm a CPA, I can't imagine having two sets of books that don't equal each other. That just doesn't make any sense to me, so,
Just to be sure, NAB is the actual
yeah.
OpenGov
It's a
assessments.
book of record, right, yeah,
And OpenGov assessments.
right,
And I'm going to pile on just very quickly
Yeah.
to the comment Mr. Edwards made. Again, ultimately, that's in large part why we're asking for footnotes on this quarterly report.
Yep.
Footnotes, so we understand buying cycles, we understand
Yeah.
purchasing cycles, whatever the case might be. One quarter might be off a little bit, and that's no surprise to everybody. One quarter may be off, and it's a huge surprise to everyone. That's where a couple sentences worth of a footnote explains that to council, make sure that we understand exactly where we are and what's going on. We're not asking, it's certainly not my intent, I would never do that, where we're asking department heads to spend hours and hours and hours providing those footnotes, 15, 20 minutes out of every 90 days. Put your footnotes down there and let us know why numbers appear to be off, or, if things are tracking great, but, something's coming up in the future. Just give us that information, give us that insight, so that it's not a circus the next time we get together and try to consume an entire year's worth of information all at once.
yeah, in one meeting,
Yes,
with a with a PowerPoint,
correct.
yeah, right,
Another part of the problem too is that a budget is only a roadmap. I mean,
Right.
things happen that are unforeseen, or developments come up, and we have to be able to ride with the punch, and so you have to have enough capital in the tank to take care of those things after that happens. And I think that cities, especially businesses, budget more than annual. They budget like maybe monthly or quarterly, and they adhere to that because they have to. They're publicly traded. Shareholders want to know what's going
Right.
on. And actually, we're not a whole lot different from that.
I can't think of any more important shareholders than the taxpayer.
That's exactly right. And so we have to have the information that we can be assured that it is correct.
Yeah,
And and actually, the taxpayers and the people who live here need to have the same information
Yeah.
that we do, and need to have it as fast as we have, basically.
it's interesting. So I just got back from a compliance conference out in California, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and it's SEC compliance. And, and you listen to everything, and we've gone through our SEC audits, and I mean, they nitpick you, I mean, like to death. I mean, about every small little thing. And I look at our processes, and I'm like, man, they'd have a field day with us, you know? I mean, because we do, I mean, but we, and I'm not saying the SEC is always correct either, but it just, I mean, there's got to be some middle ground where we operate this thing like a business. As we, you know, as we get closer and closer to $100 million, you know, city, it's like, how do you not do a better job at this?
Well, part of that too is in our borrowings, we need to have a good rating. And I'm not saying we don't. I think we probably
Yeah.
have a pretty good rating. But borrowers need to be attracted to us because they know these numbers are right.
Yeah.
And that's the way it works in the regular business world. Shareholders are attracted to a company because they pay dividends and because they present information in a proper way. And we, you know, municipalities are somewhat behind that sometimes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
I'll leave this with one final thought, at least from me, and that is, this is not a new message that we've been asking. This is not a new message that we've been delivering. Hopefully, the fact that maybe not quite as specifically as we've been, but hopefully the fact that as part of the report that we've received and we've paid handsomely for, the indication that we do need that better communication, maybe this is one of those steps that now everyone will agree with this council and we'll move forward.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds good. All righty. Let's move on to the next item, the discussion of contracting of bids for services rendered to the city of Westfield and to general contractors working on behalf of the city and those the city council oversees. This is something that I mentioned last time, and I know we haven't had much discussion about it because we've been talking about these other things. But again, I'd like to see some kind of resolution or ordinance stating that, you know, even if we hire someone, for instance, whether it be a large project, if there's underlying bids underneath, even if we are not the ones overseeing the general contractor, let's say, you know, with Grand Junction, for instance, if we go out and say, hey, these folks are gonna build it for $40 million, if there's underlying bids to that, I mean, we need to make sure that those bids are well vetted.
Well,
I don't want it to be, I think we need to make sure it's not family members, things like that, bidding on things where there's no bid or we don't get to see the bids or that sort of thing.
They need to be all underlying bids of a certain size. I mean,
Yeah.
you get little stuff, but the big stuff, and I don't know how big that has to be, but it needs to be seen by the public,
Yeah,
which would include us.
I agree.
And
Yeah.
we
And
have,
when we're not here, the next city council, I mean, or whoever sits up here, they should do the same.
yeah,
That way they make sure that, you know, whoever is mayor or whoever the next group is that's overseeing it, there's not some favoritism, you know, by one group.
Add a degree of transparency is always good.
Transparency is always good, right? So,
part of messiness, I need to tell you that one of my jobs since I've retired from Farm Bureau is I have to do the dishes at home, and every Sunday, and it's a terrible job, and you have to get in there and scrub around, and I've kind of developed a system now, so it's not so bad, but you do know what's going on. I mean, you know kind of what you had for dinner and all that sort of thing. But we need to do the same thing so that it's just second-handed, so that it is second nature that we do what we should be doing. And we don't do that. Municipalities don't do that. They've always lived by the annual budget and, well, how do we come out at the end?
you don't know which spoon hit the garbage disposal and you're gonna snag your lip on.
That's right, that's exactly right.
Two things I would add to that, Joe. One, maybe pull the seniority card, maybe throw that out there, see if, about doing the dishes yourself. And secondarily, again, going back to the reports we found in the the findings where we need better communication, we need better processes and systems in place, I think that would be, I think this certainly speaks towards that or moves us in that direction as well.
Right, okay. All right, so we'll bring this up to the rest of the city council
Yeah.
and see, you know, if anybody else is interested in it and kind of go from there.
Sounds good.
So, okay. Let's move on to discussion of findings from the BKD, Baker Tilly, Taft examination. Obviously, there's a lot of pages there. I read through the smaller report. I had some time. I actually read about a 400-page book while I was out in California and read this. I did not get through the entire BKD. I perused, I'd say I read probably 70% of it and probably perused the other 30%. The Baker Tilly one, I actually read the entire thing. Just a couple comments, you know, as a CPA and someone who works in, you know, from an independence. You know, I've seen once again, you know, the information in the paper, and I mean, first of all, what a terrible article. I mean, in the reporter. I mean, it was so one-sided. I can't even believe it. But going through the report, you know, on one side you find conclusive evidence that certain things are done incorrectly. I mean, it's just obvious. I mean, it's actually written in the report. And then the other side is inconclusive. And I will say this, and I can't remember which one was talking because I wasn't here. I was listening, you know, from BKD and Baker Tilly's standpoint. But I'm embarrassed for them, quite frankly. I'm embarrassed about the report. I mean, I'm not saying that certain things aren't correct, and I'm not saying that there isn't issues, you know, from the way that the city works. But, I mean, to name minors' names in a report, I mean, that's absurd. I mean, that is absolutely absurd. To list minors' names in a report like that. And it was inconclusive. I mean, you gotta be kidding me. I mean, I would be furious if these were my kids or my grandkids with inconclusive evidence, other than the fact that they came back and said, oh, I paid this one $144 back in 2013 or whatever it was to clean the office and do some filing. For God's sakes, are you kidding me? I mean, I think that was absurd.
Well, one of the things too, I want to go back to my original criticism of the way this was set up. The September that Baker Tilly and BKD came in, they were going to do a thorough forensic review.
Yeah,
That was the word, review, and you notice they used that
yeah.
when they presented the report. So I had two questions. What is a forensic review, and how does a review differ from an audit? An audit, you test accounts. You go in and you test certain things, and you test a range of things to follow the direction of your audit. Well, you can't audit everything of a company every time, and so that kind of shifts around year to year. But the audit is, here's what it is. A review entitles the reviewer to give an opinion.
Yeah, it's still a test.
Yeah.
Audit and review are still a test functions. Compilation is not.
Well,
Yeah,
I
I mean-
think that this kind of falls apart
Yeah.
As far as the review function is concerned. The other thing that bothered me was that I looked up what is a forensic investigation. What are the tenets of that? And basically, one of the tenets is that no party that receives money from the audited entity should be a part of that. The Taft law firm was a part of that.
They're the city attorney.
And the city attorney. So right away, opinions are going to overcome facts. And I think that we need to stay away from that. We just need to
Yeah.
deal with the facts.
Yeah, it's great that they took corrective action on certain things. I'm not complaining about that. It's interesting, you know, reading the report, and if you read it any differently, And if you say that there's conclusive evidence on one side and not the other,
Yeah.
I mean, then you're not reading. I mean, you're completely biased. Because frankly, if it was completely against the clerk treasurer and they showed empirical data that substantiated that, I'd be like, hey, okay, you know what, Cindy, I'm sorry, this is wrong. But when it doesn't, again, just to go back and name names of minors, and you know, and the whole thing about with the car, the leased car.
That
For
was
God's sakes,
ridiculous.
it made I mean, they asked about it towards the end of the investigation supposedly, but yet it made it in the final comments. I've got all the documentation that say it was a girls' trip. It was not a city trip at all. And none of the money was run through the city.
That was
That's
completely.
embarrassing.
That was ridiculous.
It's unbelievable that we paid that kind of money, and I'm sorry to say that I'm shocking the water my feet are standing in, that a CPA firm would stoop to that kind of ridiculousness and go out on a limb just to try to be heavy-handed towards both parties when there's inconclusive evidence and there's nothing even there.
And that's what
I
he
mean,
even said at the end of his presentation.
Unbelievable.
No conclusive evidence. They ought to have been ashamed to bring a report like that.
I totally agree. You know, the other thing is, I mean, and this is for the taxpayer, you know, we just went through a budget process. And in the report, there was a lot of information about the budgets and what should be and what shouldn't be and what, you know, where we should in terms of parameters, things that we asked about before. Isn't that amazing that they reported it a week after we approved the budget? I mean, you know, maybe that's just a coincidence that they showed where we were overstaffed in certain areas and understaffed in certain areas. But don't you think that probably would have helped out the city council and maybe even the administration or somebody? I mean, I thought that's poor professionalism in my view. And, you know, again, I know they're big firms and I know they do a lot of work and for us and whatever, but that report was terrible. I mean,
Well, the
it
reason-
was just poorly done.
The reason you have a city council, the reason you have people on the redevelopment commission that are private citizens is to protect the city,
Yeah,
not to protect individuals. It is to protect the city
right,
and make sure that their money is spent wisely and properly.
yeah.
And that's the only reason they're
Yeah,
there.
I hope if somebody is absolutely bored and they just can't fall asleep, that they pull that report out and read it for a little bit, and either one, they'll fall asleep instantly because it's terribly written, or number two, that they'll read it and say, hey, yeah, wow, is conclusive evidence that the administration did these things incorrectly, and there is no evidence that the clerk treasurer did these things incorrectly. You know, they can talk about the nepotism thing, and, you know, that is what it is, but again, I'm gonna go back to this. To list minors in the report when nothing even happened. I mean, listing their actual names. I mean, are you kidding me? I can't even believe that somebody even thought that was legitimate down at BKD, or even Taft. But once again, we have a conflict of interest. We have a law firm. I mean, you know, I go back and Brian Zager and I, you know, obviously we didn't agree on everything, and we on certain things. But, I mean, he wasn't confrontational to where, you know, he was just gonna try to sue everybody. I mean, and I think this, I think, you know, you think about America and you think about Westfield, and if you wanna create more divisiveness, I mean, it's coming right from these seats. It's not coming from this city council. We are doing things differently. We're looking at things differently, and we're challenging things. And that may be a shock to some that can't handle it, you know, but I gotta tell you, I don't see us, you know, trying to lawyer up and sue everybody either.
Well, that's what we're supposed to do.
Can I make a quick
Just
comment?
a second.
I think ultimately, again, I keep going back to the Baker Tilly. I think ultimately, when you look through that and read their conclusions, in large part, you have to agree with what they have there, and that is, again, better communication,
Yep.
better, for lack of a better word on my part, better infrastructure as far as, you know, processes and that type of thing, processes and procedures in place. Hopefully, reading this, everybody can come closer, move more towards the middle as far as getting on the same page, and understand that, again, Nobody's here for any specific reason other than, as I think Joe had mentioned a minute ago, make sure that we're doing the right thing for the city, make sure that we're spending the taxpayers' money appropriately. Let me say that a little bit differently. Understanding and remembering clearly that every dollar we spend is a taxpayer dollar.
That's right.
That's probably the best way to put it. Every dollar we spend is a taxpayer dollar. So we've got to figure out, as an organization, as a group, we've got to figure out the best way to do that, the most respectful and I guess just the right way to do that. So again, going back to Baker Tilly, that was probably, in my opinion, that was the most useful part of the information we received last week.
Right.
And that was just, again, an independent third party saying, here's what we need to do, here's where we're lacking, here's what we need to improve upon. I don't know that most of those things haven't already been discussed. It's just a matter of disagreeing on how we move forward. So now we've got to get serious about that, figure out how to move forward and how to do a better job.
Yep. Good point.
I just wanted to make the comment that, and as far as calling a prior employee that ran against me, and all of the little snapshots she was provided to the city where our computers sat idle. I mean, why call her and ask her questions? Why didn't they ask us those questions? But I also wanted to clear up something. Last week, when I said that it's always been hard to work in the clerk's office, that had nothing to do with this council. This council is the only council that has ever really listened to us and came to our office to see what we did or what was going on and ask questions. There's only one of them that's never been in the office, and I'm sure you guys know who he is. So I just wanted to clear that up, but that's all.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Will, do you have something?
Well, first, I want to thank the Finance Committee for the opportunity to come in and make some comments. Cindy asked that I be available if there was any questions or any documentations or anything about anything in the report that the council would like to see. Did want to point out, I think last council meeting provided a timeline. It was pretty lengthy. It was like 46, 48 pages long. That I just wanted the council to know that we have either an email, a pleading, a letter, or correspondence that will validate each and everything on that timeline. So if there's something in particular you'd like to see, just let us know, and happy to get that to you. Cindy also asked me just maybe to briefly make some comments on the review. Perhaps if there's more time allotted at a council meeting, then maybe a better venue to go in more detail. But at least wanted to touch on a few things. To be honest, I wasn't even sure where to begin in reviewing it. I spent about half the day with Cindy and her staff on Friday going through the report, each page, marking out either things that were inconsistent, misleading, or straight up false, trying to find maybe nuggets where, hey, is there areas we can improve on, but it was certainly hard to take criticism given all the things that were in the report. And I was, as I was reading through it, certainly I don't want any of our comments either that I make today or at a future council meeting to suggest in any manner that the clerk treasurer or that thinks they're perfect, that thinks that they did everything, that there wasn't anything that we can improve upon. But certainly as I went through the report, I could not help, I don't think anybody could convince me that there wasn't intent, purpose, and direction in reviewing that report from BKD. We went from a council meeting or council requesting information about Grant Park, asking about an audit, looking at our operations, to a city attorney resigning, 4 lawsuits, a $600,000 plus purported audit that had very little to do with Grant Park or Grand Junction, but spent a significant amount of time and effort in the clerk's office alleging and making findings. Some of those were the clerk treasurer destroyed documents, which I'll comment on here in a little bit. The other one was the clerk treasurer took a city vehicle to Colorado, and provided some information to you. In that information is a credit card statement from Kim that shows on May 9th that they purchased a vehicle rented a vehicle from Hertz to go on this trip to Colorado. Also, our pictures from that trip. One came straight from Cindy Gossard's phone that is geotagged and time-stamped for, I believe, May 9th in Kansas. They were taking a picture of a funnel cloud, I think, forming in the distance, but fortunately picked up the rearview mirror. So we zoomed in the rearview mirror, and you can clearly see it's a silver sedan, not a red burgundy Jeep. And that story is completely false, misleading, and again, intentional, which easily could have been debunked or verified by picking up the phone and calling the clerk treasurer's office. The review spends a lot of time on family relationships in the clerk's office, insinuating that Cindy and her daughter Carrie could misuse payments or misuse P-card. When the State Board of Accounts comes in their office every year and has never made such findings or raised any concerns with Carrie being in Cindy's office. You couldn't tell from the report, but Cindy Gasser provided every P-card receipt that was requested from the review team from 2017 forward. We were only missing one, which she promptly made a payment to the city. I think it was for a lunch for 20, 30 bucks. More time was spent on the review on an allegation that Cindy wrote her granddaughter a check for 140 bucks in 2016, which again was outside the scope. And then on Grand Junction, I thought that was interesting. So if you actually look at the print given to Grand Junction, the print given to a $144 check to a grandchild, there's about as much print given. And I and I wanted to point out that just the treatment in those two and compare those two. As you're reading that report, if you look at Grand Junction, there's some allegation about family members purchasing properties. The review team asked for information. I believe that Bishop Bertrand provides an email that was sent to the Indianapolis Star with some supporting documentation. They review it, and the conclusion is that disparage the reporter, that a professional reporter would have seen there's no issue here. And that's fine if that's the finding, and that's fine if the council's satisfied with the amount of time that was spent on that. But compare that to the treatment with the grandchild. So here we have an allegation that somebody recalls in 2016 that Cindy cut a check to her granddaughter for 144 bucks. They spent a significant amount of time going through bank statements, check statements, and list, as Councilman Patton points out, list the names of her grandchildren, one of which is a minor child. And just so you know, that I have immediately requested that report come off the city website because it's been published, asked that those names be redacted before any republishing, and as of this morning, it was still on the city's website. The clerk's office password sharing. For example, the review team makes a finding that when Cindy's out of town, someone logs into her bank, uses her login information, makes bank payments. And we find that interesting in the clerk's office. One of the things we talked about on Friday, because Cindy doesn't have a login for that to make ACH payments. As a part of our security protocol, that each staff member does something differently. Not that Cindy couldn't get one, she's the administrator on there, but that's not a function that she does. She certainly oversees it, but we find that interesting that would easily be an allegation we could debunk or provide some clarification on, because she doesn't have one. So there's no way that Carrie could log in and make bank payments on the name of Cindy Gasser. And there's a host of those, and I'm not really doing it justice, but I just want to kind of name a few of those. There are many, many, many of those throughout the report. Also make allegations that they're out of the office, lack of due diligence. Most of the complaints or information obtained from BKD about Cindy and her office come from Ms. Havard, which my understanding is not even an employee at the city. That was, for example, on page 29, Ms. Havard brings an email exchange about bond payments. BKD states, which suggested, or makes its finding, the clerk treasurer office lacks understanding of fund accounting for bond payments. There's no explanation of why they came to that conclusion. There's no analysis. There's nothing they cite to. This is just an emails that they're provided by Ms. Havard. But the issue with bond payments that came up, if they care to ask, was that Ms. Havard is wanting one of the clerk treasurer's office to create invoices, which creates income to the city that the city had not received. I believe that the SBOA has reviewed the bond accounting, is fine with it. I believe Baker Tilly even brings it up as an issue as far as what invoicing caused with respect to bond payments. No mention that Ms. Havard was Cindy's political opponent in the previous election, or as part of her function, my understanding is that she routinely discovered errors in other departments, but that part was conveniently left out. Or why the administration is using Skype to monitor the clerk treasurer's office. Why are they taking screenshots? And why does a former city employee have city emails, documents, screenshots of Skype about other city employees in her possession? But apparently that's no issue from BKD. The timeline is intentionally misleading, and I got no problem saying that. And if anybody wants to challenge me on that, I'm happy to spend a day here in front of the council and go through every one. That timeline is intentionally misleading. They leave out dates to imply that Cindy is not cooperating, and that's done by design. The review team makes no mention that immediately after receiving her first correspondence on September 2nd, Cindy responded and stated she's in the middle of 2 SBOA audits and the middle of a budget. And we just went through that process. Can you imagine what her office was going through in September and October? And she says that September and October are busy months, but happy to get the information as soon as possible. She makes herself immediately available for an interview. On October 9th, which I provided that in the packet, she sends an updated email. She specifically states, we worked with Finley and Cook and got the team view-only access with NAV. And I want to emphasize that because that becomes an issue later on in our litigation. But that's on October 19th, she gave access to NAV. That she also informed them that ADP and P card info will be provided by October 21st, which it was. And then there was some additional information we provided. You can look at the timeline in November. I think Mr. Klutz even sent an email acknowledging receipt of that information, but I think it had taken some issues with some formatting with respect to the payroll. I also provided in your packet a letter I'd sent to Mr. Herseg, dated, I believe, November 30th. Again, it was an issue relating to ADP, but at the time, Brian Sager was the city attorney, and I had assumed that Mr. Herseg was working with review. I think the engagement letter with review specifically states other attorneys we'd be working on. And in that letter, and I think I tabbed where I put there, that our understanding is that we have complied with all the requests. If there's any additional information that's needed, to please let me know, and happy to assist you if we can get those documents. And again, I tabbed and highlighted that specific section of that letter. I don't know if that was provided to Mr. Klutz, but again, my understanding at that time was that Mr. Hersek was working with the review. We also didn't receive any additional requests after November. And so it came quite to surprise. I think on January 11th, Councilman Patton received a letter indicating that we are refusing to work with the review team, hadn't provided any information. There was also additional requests in that letter that we hadn't seen before. And I believe Cindy sends an email out January 14th, and the responses were very telling. And I also included that in your packet. Those responses came from Dan Hedden. And Dan Hedden acknowledges that Cindy has provided access to NAV, but they're waiting on city IT to set up the appropriate portal.
Right.
So it had nothing to do with Cindy. Had absolutely nothing to do with Cindy. She already provided, already talked to him, and he got the login credentials. We're waiting on city IT to set up the portal. He also acknowledges that he understands and suggests that we set up a data extraction for January 25th. I think Cindy makes a reply, and again, it's there for your review. Hey, I'm busy, but I'll make it work. How's the 28th, 29th? And what's interesting is this is all left off the timeline. The January 4th date's interesting because this is all happening before Cindy gets sued. So during the day, we have confirmation that they have NAV. We have confirmation that we're trying to get a data extraction scheduled. And we have an email confirmation the review team understands. And at 6:30 at night, she's sued. And that all happens on January 14th, and that's conveniently left out of the timeline. And I believe in that letter from Mr. Patton, it indicated that there was an invitation to, again, collaborate or to meet or have discussions. And again, there's been, I think that Baker Tilly did a nice job as far as pointing out the issues with communication. That's why I wanted to provide that letter, that at least an offer was made, or that, hey, if there's any issues, let us know. I don't know how much collaborating went on, because that was after January 11th, and 3 days later is when the lawsuit was filed. And we certainly were never invited or provided an opportunity to meet with the administration or council. And in regards to the lawsuit, I wanted to touch on again, and this is, I think, one of importance, is I think I'm one of the few, I think I'm the only attorney, and I could be wrong, that actually grew up here in Westfield. My businesses are here in Westfield. My wife's business is here in Westfield. My kids go to school at St. Mary Grady here in Westfield. And I know a lot of times at our office, talking about fees and things, and I want you to know that our approach when that happened was to let's get it done. What do you need? And conversations with Cindy, and certainly she was frustrated. Hey, I've already given them this. I've already gave them access to NAB. That's fine. If we've already given it, if we haven't given it, we think we've given it, I think we've given it 3 times. What is it that you need? Give us a list of everything you need. And so we came up with an agreed entry. And on that agreed entry are a lot of items that had never been requested before. And I provided that in the packet as well, and you can look at that. And at the time, I thought that was the best way to resolve that case, was to get everything down on paper. Let's have an agreement, and let's set up data extractions that we were already talking about doing. And so we did this agreed entry. It came to their office February 12th. We initialed by every one of them, make sure there's no issues, any communication. Hey, we need more time. We scheduled another one for February 18th. They came out. And at that time, I was under the impression that this basically kind of what the review team, we had provided everything at that time, except maybe some additional small follow-up items as they're doing the review. And that agreed entry has been used as a baseball bat since the day that we signed that thing. And there's not a day I wakes up that I regret that we didn't go to court. And so that has been insinuated that, look at all the stuff that Cindy didn't give us. Look at all this. See, we had to sue her. We had to sue her to get all this. Look, she wasn't being cooperative with the review team. She wasn't doing. And that's just the type of things that we've been dealing with since January. And after that agreed entry was signed, I want to point out the notice of destructions. That's the next issue that comes up. That notice was sent out January 5th. You had to wait 30 days. If you don't hear anything back in 30 days, and you're free to destroy those documents. We were sued on the January 14th. We waited till after the review team had been in her office, physically in her office for the entire day on the 12th, for the entire day on the 18th, never asked to see any other documents, never asked to look any boxes. They've been complaining about paper, never asked to see any paper, we need to review this or do this. And after they leave, I believe it was in March, we moved forward to destroying the documents. And then lo and behold, somehow the Department of Works is looking at documents that are labeled ADP and payroll, which is false. And these are the same people that are trying to convince everybody that she took a city vehicle to Colorado, and it's completely false. I've never seen a box that has ADP or payroll written on it. Those boxes, some of those boxes ended up in my office. Ms. Poindexter had an opportunity to come look at those. Not a single one of those boxes listed ADP or payroll. But somehow the Department of Works, is concerned, contacts the review team, and we got hundreds of boxes of missing documents, so we still don't know where they're at. I ended up with about 26 of them in my office. I set my office for over a month. The review team finally came out and looked at it, and I just went to council. There was not a single piece of paper that was taken, used, or was determined to be part of the review. And there never was. Because again, it doesn't fit the narrative. The narrative is, oh, look, there goes Cindy again, destroying city documents. Oh, we're in the middle of a review, she's hiding something. Look at this, makes the paper. Oops. That's the narrative. In regards to the ADP issue, we were sued over ADP. And I keep hearing all the time that Cindy's not willing to unlock tools or not willing to do things. And I think there was some discussions before COVID hit. We're trying to get together and get a dashboard set up. And I'd sent emails to ADP, the rep Ross, hey, no problem, Cindy's fine with providing access to these tools, and we're not okay with her being removed as the administrator, but no problem. And those emails have been provided in your packet. Those aren't my emails, those are Ross's emails. You'll see Ross says, can't get the administration on for a call, or hey, our office is calling the administration, imploring them to get on a call. And this is in December 13th, December 15th. And so it's just surprising when we get a letter dated January 11th that's addressed to Councilman Patton that says that Cindy's been thwarting the administration's ability to access these tools. Well, clearly, I have emails I've given you can look for yourself, make your own decision. It clearly says their efforts were made to jump on a call, and those calls were not made. In regards, just a few comments on the timeline. To give you one example, BKD states that they got access to NAV January 29th. And the clear insinuation is that's when Cindy gave it, because it fits the narrative. That's after we had to sue her. See, we had to sue her to get access to NAV. That's why on the timeline it says January 29th. An unbiased report would have said, Cindy provided us login credentials to NAV on October 15th, and we had to wait over 90 days for the administration to set up a portal to get access to NAV. But those details and information, again, is conveniently, intentionally left out of the report. Again, I think to fit a narrative. And as I mentioned, I had like 10 pages. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And I understand that this maybe isn't maybe more time maybe for it at a later day. But there were allegations made. There were aspersions casted on Cindy and her staff. I think some of them even have to take a couple minutes to make some comment if the council or finance committee would allow it. But I just wanted to at least make a statement to the finance committee on some of these things. If there's any additional information that you want, like to see, please contact us, and happy to provide it. And again, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Scott.
First of all, I want to thank you for providing us the information. I've looked through a lot of the information you've given us this morning. I'm going to study that a little bit more. I appreciate, and again, to the point that's been made up here already this morning, I think anyone that reads the report and tries to read it without bias will be able to quickly look at that and notice there is a difference in the way things are phrased. There is a difference in the way things are worded, depending on what the area of investigation or review was. Again, you bring obviously a wealth of knowledge, and I would ask that if possible, whether it's this week or excuse me, this next meeting or the following, make time, please, to present this not only to the entire council, but also to the greater public that would be listening through a city council meeting.
Be happy to do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I want to say one more thing. Part of the process was they brought various parties in. I suppose all the counselors were treated the same. But one of the things that they said, do you have any areas of concern? And so basically I gave them the State Board of Accounts report for, I think, 18 and 19. And I said, those are my areas of concern. And they said, well, now that you've talked to us, there'll be no further communication until this work is over. I don't know whether they said the same thing to you guys or not, but, or to the other counselors. But I noticed that there was a lot of communication, 5 phone calls, I think I saw on an invoice from BKD to the administration, and it could only be about one thing, about that work, that review that they were doing. So they didn't treat everybody the same on that. I don't know, it's like, well, Joe, in your childhood, you could have robbed a grocery store, but I didn't. But we thought maybe you did. And, well, prove it. Now, everything's blank then. And if the police, I see the police chief's out there, he couldn't do his work like that, and he wouldn't get very far in court. But I just thought that was not smart. I mean, it should have been honed in a little tighter than that. And,
Yeah. I don't, thanks, Will, you're good. Just maybe some final comments and we'll be done here, is that, from the start, when we met a long time ago, I think when we first became city councilors, we sat in that room with everybody, because frankly, the one thing in the report, which is correct, is it is a absolutely dysfunctional relationship between the administration and the clerk treasurer. And, and Todd made the comment to us that, for years we made it a sport to beat up on the clerk treasurer. And, from my perspective, that's grossly irregular to even make that comment. I can't believe they even made it, truthfully. But, it's ongoing. And, I see in the report, hey, they ought to have a retreat. And as a very good city councilor once told me that, you can change someone's, behavior, but you can't change their character. And I would say, if you want to talk about, women in the workplace, and my wife's a CPA, and she's smarter than I am, because she didn't run for city council. But man, I cannot imagine somebody saying that to my wife. That's embarrassing. That we make it a sport to beat up on the clerk treasurer. Unbelievable. I think we need to take a hard look and say, hey, you know what? Maybe it's time to make a change. Maybe it's time to make a change within the administration. If we really want to create good communication and better functionality amongst all of us, maybe it's time to make a change.
And to that point, I'm going to jump in again very quickly. To that point, this isn't about first of all, points you made, Councilor Patton, were valid and accurate. This isn't about the administration. This isn't about the clerk treasurer's office. This isn't about the city council. If there's a group, if there's an individual or a group that thinks otherwise, I think their focus is ill-placed. This is about the city of Westfield. This is about the taxpayers of Westfield, period. That's really all it is. So anybody that wants to point fingers at the administration, at the clerk treasurer's office, at this council, again, I think your focus is just ill-placed. It's a matter of, are we doing the best that we can do for the taxpayers and for the city of Westfield? And Troy references it, Councilor Patton references it often, that if this were a business, the reality of it is, if this was a business, we would not be a successful business, period. We wouldn't be long for the world. The reality is, we have to make sure we're doing the best job, regardless of what personal agenda we might have or what differences of opinion we might have. We can do a better job. We have to do a better job, period.
yeah, I want to say too, I see William Knox out there. He has been a person who has come through. We asked him for profit and loss for Grand Park. He did it. And it was up there on the screen. People understood, and it was good. And William, I thank you for doing that. That's the kind of stuff we need.
Yeah. All right, with that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting, please. All right, thank you.